Hi, and welcome to What the Phalange, the podcast where we watch every episode of Friends, discuss it, deconstruct it, and fan over it, one episode at a time.
My name is Quinn, pronouns ZZR or they, them.
And my name is Emily, pronouns she and her.
This week, we're talking about Season 1, Episode 20, the one with the evil orthodontist. Aired April 5th, 1995, written by Dottie Abrams, and directed by Peter Bonners. I don't think we've had an episode written by Dottie Abrams before.
I do not think so either. In this episode, Rachel starts seeing her ex-fiancé, Barry,
despite the fact that he is now engaged with her ex-best friend.
The gang is getting peeped on by someone across the street with a telescope.
And Chandler shows that once again he can't properly function around women as he waits ever so impatiently for a call from his first date from the night before.
Bum, bum, bum. All right.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Quinn. How's it going?
It's going all right. We survived the elections.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the lesser of two evils, which is what we wanted, and we were very, very excited about.
Yeah, my favorite meme that you posted this week was, thank God that Biden won so that we could go back to hating him.
Yeah, I know. I feel that. I feel that a lot. It's like, it feels like a bittersweet kind of day, or it was a bittersweet kind of day on Saturday when we got the news, like sweet in all the ways in which, like, you know, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and my Facebook feed, and it was just like a bunch of people who were posting how freaking happy they were. But what was also really nice to see was that people were not just posting about how happy they were also posting like, okay, great, now that Trump's out, we've got lots of work to do. Like, it wasn't this like, all right, now we can sit back and like, you know, chill. It's like, no, we like the work here is not done. We gotta hustle, you know? So
yeah, totally. I definitely had the sentiment. I was like, okay, yes, I totally agree. But can we please just wait until Monday?
And then I saw like a really, really like, I follow like, it's called super dank anarchist memes.
Nice.
And it was like, it was something along the lines of like, no, they can't wait till Monday. They're not going to enjoy their Sunday brunch. We're going to piss in their Sunday brunch. I was like, okay, whoa. I was like, waiting till Monday is for me, not for them.
Yeah,
like,
I know, right? It's like, I'm tired.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Exactly.
Do you know how many emotions I've had this week? More than I know I had.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So maybe a few updates on the podcast. Okay. We got some great feedback on how our podcast was sort of unedited last week. It wasn't fully unedited, but
they were like, about what?
But it was like by majority unedited.
Mm-hmm.
And that was lovely. That was nice to know that like it was appreciated content despite the fact that it wasn't like pristine, or we basically kept all of our ums, essentially. I think that's the main issue with our podcast. We're going to do it again this week. And I think we want a little bit of feedback from everyone to sort of let people know what you guys think of the podcast. Because also we're kind of starting to veer a little bit more towards, instead of going through the episode like scene by scene, which sort of just took up a lot of time, you know, instead of picking out more like specific themes and concepts that we want to talk about the episode, we're kind of leaning towards that right now. And so give us your feedback if you prefer more of like a play-by-play of what happened in the episode, or if you actually just appreciate us taking up the time instead to just explore the concepts that we feel are worth talking about.
Yeah.
Not that the whole episode isn't worth talking about, because like I really do like going through it scene by scene. I would happily just have Emily, you know, say every single line and then me tell everyone what I like about that line.
I don't know if that would be a very entertaining podcast.
I mean, it would be very entertaining for me.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Yeah, so did you want to get into the episode?
Yeah. So what are your general feels about this episode, Emily?
Okay, I guess there was like a lot of things to unpack. I want to like talk about my general feels about this episode at the same time that I talk about the three things that I want to talk about because they like determined how I felt about this episode.
Yeah, go. That sounds great.
So I want to talk about kind of the dynamic of Rachel, Barry, and Mindy, and especially the question around like, should Rachel have been Mindy's maid of honor, and like the ethics behind that and everything kind of within that relationship, because I have a lot of thoughts about it and maybe they're controversial thoughts. So we'll see. The second thing I want to talk about is Joey sexualizing lesbianism throughout the entire frickin' episode.
I feel like we're just going to overlap for everything. Go ahead.
And specifically, like, I guess that made me think of my feels around this episode is that I actually felt like the writing was really good in a lot of ways in this episode. There were a lot of like silly jokes here and there. And I really liked this episode in a lot of ways. It's not like my favorite. It's like kind of just there. But I did feel like all those lesbian jokes were literally just filler because Joey didn't have any other plot this episode. And so except for calling, finding the peeper there, but it just felt like an unnecessary kind of lazy writing, lazy jokes. That's my feel.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is, again, Chandler's inability to function around women. And also how shitty the men are.
In this episode again? Yeah.
And like, isn't that what we called our last episode?
No.
Okay, because I had originally wrote for the title and created an entire artwork for our episode last week that was called the one where all the men treat the women like shit. And then or treat women like shit.
Well, it is an overarching theme. Yes. That's for sure. But that's not what we ended up calling it. Yeah, I think we have a lot of overlapping in what we kind of want to talk about. I like what I put down here was like Joey being gross.
I put that so many times in my notes.
I also want to talk a little bit about Chandler, although he doesn't like I wanted to bring him up, but he wasn't really like a focus or a center for me. I think something that's going to be really interesting to unpack this episode is the confusing or complicated dynamic with like Barry, Mindy, and Rachel. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like one of our fun things that we like to do where we take like scenarios, it's all written out, it's not real, but then sort of like talk about how could we transform this to be better people, and like what can we learn from this? What are the actual like responsibilities in these situations? And
which is why I think we're gonna have contrasting views on this. So this is gonna be interesting.
Possibly. I mean, and then something that I also just really want to like talk about is just how different communication was at this time. Like it's been 25 years. Wow. And sorry. Whoa. And like just like the whole like telephone situation and yeah, and just like thinking how now it's just so different. It's so freaking different. Like Chandler, why don't you just go like one of that people's posts on Instagram?
Double tap those photos. Totally. Okay, yeah. I kind of want to talk about that too, so that's great. But I want to talk right away into the cold open. Can I start with the cold open?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So right away, the first conversation they're having is the Mr. Peanut versus Mr. Salty. I forget fully what the whole conversation's around.
Who would you rather be, Mr. Salty or Mr. Peanut?
Okay. And then Ross chimes in and says, I don't know, I would rather be corn nuts because they're crazy, is what he says.
Right. Well, it was because Joey was like, I'd rather be Mr. Salty because he's the toughest of them, which again, toxic masculinity all over the place.
Around peanuts.
And then that's where it's like, Ross is like, because he's crazy. Also,
right.
just to put in here. Crazy is not the best word to use in general. But we can get into that another episode.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so fun facts about Mr. Peanut. This year, tragically, the world
How do
lost.
I do like tear?
The world lost Mr. Peanut in a tragic roadside accident. Mr. Peanut and his friends were driving down the highway, and there was something in the middle of the road as they took a sharp turn. And unfortunately, the
Peanut mobile?
Peanut mobile was that word?
Which looks a lot like the van I want to live in a year from now, guys.
Interesting. Got thrown off the road, and Mr. Peanut and two of his friends landed holding on to a branch on the side of a cliff.
Much like any Bugs Bunny episode.
And in order to protect his two friends, Mr. Peanut sacrificed his life, letting go of his cane and tumbling to his death into an explosive fire below.
Roasted peanut butter.
R.I. Peanut.
So Emily's not joking, by the way, right now. Like, this is an actual commercial that just came out. Apparently, it's like a setup for the Super Bowl that's coming up in a little bit.
Yeah.
And there is a hashtag that what's the company name? The company who owns Mr. Peanut or whatever is actually pushing for like
Planters.
Planters is pushing for people to mourn Mr. Peanut by using the hashtag #RIPeanut.
Yeah, so you can go use the hashtag #RIPeanut and say some nice words for Mr. Peanut. But also, he was like a billionaire with a monocle who used to sell peanuts to other peanuts despite being a peanut himself. Well, he used to sell peanuts to people.
It's
capitalism.
Yeah.
At its finest.
I mean, like, I was like, maybe there's some like internal workers that are like, burn the rich. And Emily was like, no.
I don't have that much faith in a massive corporation. But now they've introduced Peanut Jr. Also, despite rumors that were circulating in 2010 claiming that Mr. Peanut was in fact gay,
which Phoebe mentions at the end of the show.
Which Phoebe mentions at the end of this episode. Those rumors were quelled by the CEO of Planters, saying that Mr. Peanut and his friend, I think his name is Benson, are just friends and live in separate residences. So sorry, all of you Mr. Peanut is gay fans out there. He's not.
Right.
But also, maybe he just has a homophobic CEO and he doesn't feel comfortable telling him these things. All right. I think we should move on.
Maybe
from
he's
Peanut.
faked his death so that he could
go live with Mr. Benson.
Yeah.
Or whatever
and they could go live their happy gay life out of the public eye.
That's great. Okay. So also what's happening in this cold open is that there is a creep with a telescope. Creeping in on the house. And Chandler has the not at all so pleasant line that says, I feel violated and not in a good way. And it's a gross line.
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that.
It's a gross line because being violated in itself implies
not a good way.
Not a good way. So yeah. Okay, so let's move on.
Let's talk about Chandler because he's the one that's talking about in like that second scene in the cafe how it was like he went on the best date,
the greatest first date of all time. Yeah,
what it's like school children will be taught in school or something, whatever. Anyway, he's so dramatic. I love it.
And then he says, "We didn't play any games." And then he doesn't want to call her because he doesn't want to seem needy.
Yeah. Like, it was definitely written out to have exactly, like, to just...
get that reaction.
Yeah. Like, to point out...
how ridiculous it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's like, rewatching this episode, I just really appreciate how they're setting up Chandler right now. Because... again, we've talked about this, I think, like more times than maybe people want to hear in this. But I really, really, really love Chandler's growth in this show. And and they're really setting it up. Like right now, he's like, he's dating. He's clearly not that serious about anyone. He's willing to like play games. He like it's just it's great. I mean, it's horrible because like literally this whole episode, you just want to like hit him. And as in the words of Monica, where it's like, I can't believe my parents are actually pressuring me to find one of you.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Yeah, and all two of them, but they're all in agreement to every aspect. So when Chandler's saying that I don't want to, seem too needy, like both Ross and Joey are like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes total sense. I think Joey says, let her hang a little, let her dangle a little, or something like that. Which is just like,
yeah.
What a waste of time.
It's such a waste of time. It's also like, I also feel like that was way more part of the dating game than it is now in a lot of ways. Like, not that it was like, okay, but I just feel as though because there was literally only one way to contact someone, like, was it different?
Right. Whereas like now it's so normalized to like
you go on a date with someone, you go on
you've internet stalked them already. Well, not stalk, but like you've surveyed all of their social media platforms.
Yeah.
Already. You already know all the connections that you have with them.
And after the date, you've probably liked a post of theirs or a photo of theirs. And I'm sure there's like some form of dating rule where like you don't like someone's photo right after going on a date with them, or like it's gonna be too quote unquote needy or whatever. And I understand I would like to replace the term needy with like coming on too strong, because I do think that there is something to say about coming on too strong.
Yeah, totally.
And so I don't know if they're referring to being like to Chandler coming on too strong if he calls her, that's a little ridiculous because they had the date the night before. If anything, like that's the best time to call someone, is to be like we had a great date last night, like, and I think personally that the ball is in as much her court as it is in his.
Yeah, I think though, like, again, I think dating etiquette has changed, and I think that from every other aspect that I've watched in this show, because, I mean, when the show was aired, I was too young to be dating. I was 5 years old when this episode was released, guys. So I think that it was much more common for it to be like in like the quote unquote man's court for like after a date. Like it's like referred to in the rest of the season, sort of like this thing where it's like, I'll call you is kind of the thing that like the guy will say. It's like kind of in the guy's court, because no matter what a woman does, it'll be too needy if she's the one asking for anything, you know?
Worse.
And then, yeah. But I do think it's like, I think that there is still very much like a game, quote unquote game that people will play these days. But I think it's just evolved in a lot of different ways. Like communication is so much more fluid now, right?
Yeah.
It'd be so much more common for like, after a date to, send someone a post that was relevant to a conversation that you guys had during the date, or, like to follow up with like, oh yeah, this is the show that I was talking about. Or, like anything along those lines, Snapchat each other because that's a thing, like it's,
are people still using Snapchat?
I mean, yes, people use it as like a whole social media marketing platform. I don't know how it's used in that sense, but it is a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel as though it's just been so long since I've dated that I don't like have the same kind of memories around. But like all of my like back and forth kind of dating things was like not like the ones that I'm thinking of were like not with men, in the sense of like the times in which like I was really panicking about like, should I send a message? Should I not send a message? I guess there's like one, but like really like I feel as though like that idea of like the ball being in their court, like I feel like it's been so long since I felt that way while dating someone. Like I was like, I don't know, like 19 the last time I felt that way about dating someone. Like I don't know. Like, I mean, like with a dude, the ball being in the court of the dude.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's just like, but there is definitely a feeling like around like, am I coming on too strong? Like, am I coming off as like someone who's like desperate, as Chandler says, you know? And I do understand that feeling of like, I don't know how this person, like, how frequently this person likes to communicate. Like, for example, if you don't know how, if like someone is like a frequent texter nowadays, like, is someone's the kind of person to like look at their phone all the time and constantly sending messages, or are they the type of person who goes on Facebook once a week and like never responds to their Facebook messages? You know, like, so then the communication's going to feel very different. So if like they've sent you like, you know, one message and you sent them 3, you're like, oh my God, am I coming on too strong? So it's like, I don't know. I guess I do understand a little bit about this quote unquote game, because I do feel like there is a certain amount of like when you're getting to know someone and you don't know what they constitute as like a regular amount of communication, like what they expect out of a date, et cetera, et cetera. And like you're not at the place there where you've like opened the lines of communication to be able to talk about these different things. I feel like there is a certain amount of like game playing until you get there, but it just shouldn't be considered a game. It should be like, you know, a kind of like a preliminary dating. Oh my God. You can tell I've been working in the admin section. I was just like imagining like a pipeline of like, this person nailed the first interview. Let's send them over to the second interview. Like, this person nailed the first date. Oh my God. If you want me to create a dating pipeline for you, please let me know. I will do it.
I feel like there is room more and more in the world for matchmakers, because I just feel like people are so much more willing to like use external services to date now. And I just feel like matchmakers are literally just brokers. You know, like you can like hire a consultant for so many different things who are sometimes brokers that like connect you with these different things, like, you know, that other freelancers that they think are most effective for what you need. And I'm just like, that's what a matchmaker is, you know?
True.
It's literally just this freelancer who's like a consultant for you that's going to help match you up with some certain other, you know, consultants or freelancers that will help fulfill a need, and then you can choose which one is best for you. Anyway, I just want there to be some more queer matchmakers out there, guys, because dating sucks.
Especially during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Phoebe calls Chandler testosterone,
which is great.
which I think is really
But
great.
also, hormones have very little, if nothing, to do with anything of anyone's character.
Yes, true. But it's just a great word.
Yeah, no, it's great because it sounds like macaroni.
Yeah, exactly. Testosterone.
Macaroni.
Okay.
Testosterone and cheese.
Oh, God. So then Rachel comes into the cafe. Like, we're not talking scene by scene, but we are setting up kind of the whole episode here. So Rachel comes into the cafe and she's just spent kind of the afternoon with Barry. He's apparently been sending her flowers, sending her gifts. And they've clearly, I guess, started seeing each other, you could say. And so
let's start unpacking that.
Yeah, let's do that. I think that, yeah, you go.
Well, okay. So the storyline kind of let's summarize the storyline here, okay? So in the end of the last episode, Barry barges in right as Ross was about to be like, I like you. I think we should go out. And he's like, I actually love you still. And then it sort of picks up here where Rachel has gone out to see him, and you kind of piece together that Barry has been sort of relentlessly calling Rachel and sending her flowers, and the point of her meeting up with him was to tell him to stop. Which, in my experience with men, giving them attention will not make them stop being annoying. But anyway,
I think I do have to feel like it's a little different. Like it is an ex-fiance. You're going to spend your life with this person. I feel as though there's like a different kind of relationship than like that like weird guy you dated for like 2 months who's relentlessly messaging you, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But I do agree that, like, he clearly knows that if he pesters her enough, that she'll take the time, you know?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I do also sympathize, because she's like, and she says it, she was like, it was familiar. And I think
Yeah,
that that's
totally.
a really important line, because you're seeing that, like, and it's such a real line, I think, that feeling of like getting back together with someone because they're familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We
think
talked
you
about this-
asked one of that question on the polls.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten back together with like an actual partner, but I've definitely like gotten back together with like someone who I was seeing or sleeping with, you know, like more of like that kind of partner.
So 67% of people who answered our polls said yes to have you ever gotten back together with someone because they were familiar.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really real thing, you know, like when someone's familiar, it doesn't mean nothing, you know, it's not just familiarity. It means that you have a foundation of a relationship together. And let's be real, like the worst part of a relationship is like the beginning part. I mean, it could be
Some people
part.
would argue otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think people like both kind of thing for different reasons, and I think that
there's a vulnerability that comes with first starting to date someone.
Yeah, exactly, and having already reached that stage and knowing how you tolerate each other and how you like can work around each other and like kind of have, and not just like some unexpected things come up. It's like you know each other, you know, like what causes this and what does that, and you know.
Yeah, totally. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that, like, okay, so then Chandler Ross comes in and he kind of shoves Chandler in this like, tell her that this is a bad idea, like support me as a friend.
I love it. I have my reasons.
But then Monica comes through, and I know we are going to do this at the end of the episode, but I'm going to go ahead right now and nominate Monica for being the best friend.
Right, you guys. Episode. So from starting last week, Emily came up with the idea that we're going to have a segment at the end of the episode of who's the best friend of the episode.
So I'm putting in, this is example one, because there's more than one example in this episode. And this is example one of Monica coming through with being the best friend. And okay, I want to bring up something. So this past weekend, for those who don't know, which is all of you, I took a weekend course, basically a trauma sensitive training. And one of the things that they said, and it really stuck with me, was this idea of offering support that is both grounded in reality and compassion. And the speaker of this course said that reality without compassion can sound really mean and rude, but compassion without reality is or could be enabling. And so all that to say that I feel like Monica in this role, she like comes through, and when Rachel asks, we had fun, it was nice, is there anything wrong with that? Monica comes through and she's like, okay, yeah, there is some things wrong with that. Like, you know, she gives her kind of like this tough love moment. And I think that Rachel kind of needed that. Rachel kind of needed someone to be like, look, like do whatever you want, but also like, you know, he's dating your ex-best friend, or he's engaged to your ex-best friend, you know? Mm-hmm. So moving forward, they basically end up having sex. Rachel and Barry have sex, and then we get into this whole other...
In a dentist chair, which probably
it's an
better...
orthodontist chair?
Oh, whatever. Which is like probably better than the car, but I think it probably took a lot to figure out how like they were going to shoot that scene and have them both somehow fit on that chair.
That was weird.
And to like be able to sit there and look naturally at ease, as opposed to like, okay, if I, hold on to you this way, I'm not going to fall.
Yeah, it feels like a very impractical place to have sex.
Anyway.
Anyways, whatever.
Anywho.
But yeah, and so do you want to talk a little bit more about this? Like,
well, okay, let's do you want to talk about that scene specifically, or pan over to like when she comes home to...
Yeah, we could do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she gets home and everyone finds out. She seems very dazed when she gets in, and I think it's really funny that there's like floss in her hair.
Yeah, she's trying to pretend that like nothing happened, that she told them off, that like
I don't think she was trying to particularly pretend anything. I think she just like was sort of out of it and didn't particularly feel like answering people's questions.
That's fair, yeah.
You know, and then, you know, Monica notices, is perceptive as she usually is, and kind of points something out, and then it comes out and everyone knows. And I want to talk about Ross's reaction in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that, like, initially it's really easy to look at Ross, and we've talked so many times before about how controlling Ross is of Rachel and how that's like a pattern and an issue. Like, he hasn't even, I mean, whether or not you've told her that you like her, being controlling of her is not okay. But also, he hasn't even told her that he likes her, and he's getting upset at her repetitively
for making these like quote unquote wrong choices about her life.
You know, like that are, you know, have nothing to do with him. From
and
the
are really just like shaming her in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. But I also find this conversation that they have particularly interesting because Ross has just gotten out of a marriage that ended with, not only because his partner, you know, is a lesbian and is now with a woman, but also because she cheated on him, right? And I think that this is like something to consider in this conversation here, where Ross is getting extremely upset and agitated and has to leave. I do think that part of it has to do with his like upsetness about Rachel now sort of seeming to be dating Barry. But I think also part of it is like she brings up like, isn't this the same as Carol? And like, wouldn't you sleep with Carol if she was like, I want you right here, right now. And, you know, he's like, that's different. And I kind of agree that it's different. And like, I'm not going to say that it's like totally fine for him to just sleep with Carol whenever he wants because she, you know, Susan was like the other woman and like, you know, but I think that it's like all the more upsetting to like bring that up, a relationship that ended because, you know, his wife cheated on him, and like it is different, you know, like he had his wife cheat on him, and you know, now Rachel is being that person where she and this guy who's engaged is now like he's with Rachel cheating on the person he's engaged with.
Right.
He can see himself in Mindy, you know?
I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like the writers didn't consider that.
Yeah, probably not, but that's the whole point of the show.
Right.
We talk with them like they're real humans.
That's true.
They are not real humans.
I think that like I really think that he is just being obnoxious. Like I wrote in my notes, I was like, I prefer when Ross is sad and needy than controlling and needy. Because like, you know what? Be sad that Rachel doesn't want to date you just by the fact that you literally never told her that you want to date her. Like, be obnoxious, be annoying, but like, don't let that come through in a way in which you're telling her how to navigate her life. You know, like if you're uncomfortable telling her how you feel, that's totally fine, you know, but don't expect her to like mold her life around you when you clearly have not expressed that you like her in any way.
Right. I also, though, think that it's valid, like in a group of people when, you know, a friend in common, you know, it comes out that they were part of someone cheating on their partner. I think that it's like natural that you're going to have a variety of responses, and some people are going to be upset about it. And some people are going to be fine with it. And I think that's just like the reality. I mean, cheating, whether in poly communities or not, because cheating can happen in poly communities, it's like it can be a very upsetting thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that it's not obvious. And like if we're going to talk a little bit more about this whole Mindy and you know, talking a little bit further into, you know, Mindy calls Rachel and she wants to talk to Rachel and she wants to have a meeting. I do want to bring up something that we didn't say from the last scene, which is that when Rachel is leaving the orthodontist office,
Oh yeah, that kid is there.
well, the kid is there. I wasn't actually going to talk about that, but
It's the same kid from the second episode of the season when she goes and gives back the ring. Just FYI.
I believe it. When you are seeing an orthodontist, you have to go pretty frequently to get your wires tightened.
Yes, Emily and I both had braces.
Yeah. But okay, so Barry says to Rachel, he says, I'll just break it off with her, referring to Mindy. And he says it so offhandedly, and he just says, I'll just break it off with her. In this like really kind of like totally like
there's
ridiculous way.
So many layers to that. And it's so fucked up on every single one.
Okay. And so then basically Mindy finds out that Rachel has been sleeping. Rachel's been sleeping with Barry. And then Rachel finds out that Mindy was sleeping with Barry right before they were supposed to get married. And then they have this like bonding moment where they're both like apologizing to each other and hugging, when really the person who should be apologizing is Barry, but like obviously they should also apologize to each other. But like it then kind of works out to be this thing where they end up confronting Barry and you know, saying that they're both going to break up with him. And he like has this moment where he's like, everything that I did it because I loved you. And then he like hesitates and he's like, Mindy. Like he like, it's like he flipped a coin in
Rachel
his
even
head.
has to be like, which one are you talking to?
Yeah, who
like,
are you talking to there, Bear?
Bear, yeah. And, you know, I definitely think that in that moment, he's literally just choosing whoever he thinks he has the best bet with, to be completely honest.
Which is really, really fucked up because to begin with, he says, like, I'll just break it off with Mindy.
Yeah.
Like, he just, like, he clearly doesn't actually give a shit about either one of these women. And, like, from my guess, it's like he feels like he has to get married. He has to, like, kind of go through that route, and it's not really something that he wants to do, but like, you know, he's gonna do it.
Yeah. And like, I mean, this is not a huge spoiler alert, but like later down in seasons to come, we actually find out that Barry was also cheating on Rachel with one of her sisters. I think it was Amy.
Oh shit.
Down the line. Yeah. And like while they were engaged or while they were in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so it's like Barry is like, you know, a serial cheater, and you know, it's
he clearly has some commitment issues.
Yeah, and women are just sort of like disposable to him, for him to just sort of offhandedly kind of be like, oh, just dispose of this person that I'm in a relationship with. Like no conversation, no, like with no real concern about, like no sign of like compassion or empathy or at all.
Yeah, and I do feel like, because you asked in our polls, and I was actually really surprised by the answers. You asked in the polls, you were like, would you still be Mindy's maid of honor after all of this? Mm-hmm. And most people said no. And I was actually quite shocked. Do you have the numbers there for that one?
Yeah. 11% said that they would be Mindy's maid of honor after all this. 89% said no.
Yeah. What did you answer?
I didn't answer. I don't always answer the polls because I do them.
I mean, what is your answer?
What is my answer? I would, I mean, okay. So I don't think we've done it. Okay. I don't want to give an answer without like talking about some other things too, though, in it. Okay. Because the thing is that like even Mindy in the first place asking Rachel to be her maid of honor, like we also didn't talk about the fact that like, why is Rachel even saying yes to this?
Right.
For other reasons outside of what just happened here in this episode, you know? Right. Like 7 months ago, because it's actually said in this episode, 7 months ago was the last time that she talked to Mindy, which is when she walked out on Barry. And then when she went to give Barry back the ring, she found out that Mindy went on the honeymoon with Barry, like her honeymoon that she was supposed to go on with her fiance, or her then was supposed to be husband. And then they kicked it off and he got hair plugs for Mindy, you know? And then still don't talk except for when Rachel insults her on the phone. And then fast forward 7 months, and Mindy's now asking her to be the maid of honor, and like has not reconciled in the situation, like what had happened 7 months ago. Didn't, like Mindy just started dating Barry, she's Rachel's best friend, and Rachel had to find out through Barry, like that's just like really shitty friend stuff all around.
That's true, yeah.
And so it just makes it like all very strange, this episode to begin with, like why is Mindy talking to Barry? And then it's sort of,
but we don't know that Mindy and Rachel haven't communicated at all, do we?
Yeah, in the episode she says, I haven't spoken to Mindy in 7 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's odd.
That whole situation playing out is a pretty big wedge in a friendship, especially if like the reconciliation was a few words and then they don't speak for 7 months. Like,
yeah, I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to figure it out, because I do feel as though, from my perspective, Rachel has like pretty much just like fully not into Barry. Like, and the only reason why she was dating him is because, or seeing him again and sleeping with him was because, again, it was familiar. But I don't actually think that she has any romantic interest, any like harbored feelings around Barry, which is why I think she says yes to being Mindy's maid of honor. And I also think she says yes because she panics. She panics because she thinks that Mindy's there to confront her about cheating on her,
right.
Cheating on with him or whatever. And so when she's not asking that question, her like first response is just yes, yes. It's also like, it would be weird if she said no. How do you say no to someone asking to be their maid of honor? It's more weird for Mindy to ask than for Rachel to say no.
Emily, I think that might be more a reflection of your unhealthy need to say yes to people.
No, but like honestly, if someone feels as though you are like an integral part of their life to the point where like they want you to be their maid of honor and you didn't realize that they had considered you to be this integral part of your life, like you're going to say no? You're going to be like, no, I actually don't feel like we're that close. Like that's fucking mean.
I mean, I think in that situation, it probably would have been better if Rachel said no, because she's sleeping with Mindy's fiancé.
Yeah, for sure, which is where the panic part comes through, the panic part. But like at the end of the episode, she agrees to still be Mindy's maid of honor. And I think that the reason why she still agrees is because she literally realizes that she has zero feelings for Barry. She absolutely doesn't give a shit about Barry. And like she just wants to like be there for Mindy and like do what she needs to do and then move on.
Yeah. I don't have any issues. To be honest, I feel like when Rachel initially agrees to be the maid of honor, I'm like, this is weird. That shouldn't be a yes. That should be I think we've grown too far apart and I don't think this makes sense. Also, you're marrying the guy that I left at the altar that you started dating literally on the same day as my wedding. And
then finding out that
like,
you were sleeping with him beforehand.
Yeah, those are all very valid reasons to be like, nah.
Mm-hmm. But I think that shows that Rachel is like completely over it.
But I don't... Okay, I think that she could still not want to be with Barry, but also have doubts. And I think it's interesting because at the end of the episode, she does say that she's like, she's found closure in the situation. She always felt like she doubted herself, and she realizes that she actually, dodged a bullet in the situation. And I think that makes sense because all of her family was all angry at her, and all of her rich society was like, how could you do something like that? But yeah, I think that if anything, though, for me, and I also think it's weird that Mindy even asked her. Yeah. But then I think that also, like, by the end of the episode, I think it actually makes more sense for Rachel to be Mindy's maid of honor, because, like, through that experience, they, like, re-bonded, really re-reconciled. Rachel could really, like, discern her feelings for the situation. Mindy validated her in the situation.
Yeah.
And then Mindy is going to go through with it, but based on her own personal judgments of the situation and what she was prioritizing, what she actually wants.
Which I think that when I first watched this episode, like years ago, I think I was definitely along the lines of like, he cheated on you. How could you ever, do this? And I think I've always had, like, for a longest time, I was always like, in my head, I was like, cheating is the absolute no-go. If anyone ever cheats on me, we're done. Never say bye. Like, all, like, pack a bag, blah, blah, blah. But, like, I think there's so much complexity to adultery, like, that, like, or adultery if it's a marriage, whatever, cheating if it's not a marriage, but, like, adultery, fancy.
Wow.
But I genuinely think that, like, there are worse things you could do in a relationship than cheat on a partner.
Yeah, totally.
Like, way worse. And, like, clearly Mindy feels as though this is not, like, that far out of her boundaries. She's not super, like, she's decided to accept it, and she's, like, moving on, and she wants to marry him.
Yeah, what I find really interesting in this situation is that Mindy's not like, I'm still probably going to marry him because I love him so much, or because I think he's still a great guy. I think he really means it.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's for her own
title.
It's for her own reasons. Like, she has her own, like, him being faithful to her is clearly not a priority for her in the relationship. Yeah. And what she actually wants out of the relationship is, some people, in some ways it could be like shallow, security. I guess. But it's like,
it could also be security, yes, financial
security. And, at the end of the day, they're living in a super monogamous sort of, rich society. It's like, maybe she's like, I don't care if he sleeps with other people. Like, that's not a concern to me. Like, he can go get his boots
jollies.
His jollies anywhere he wants. That's not what I look for in a relationship. And
I don't think she feels that, like, nonchalant about it, because she clearly approached Rachel and was, like, crying and was upset about it. But I do think it's like she's just like she just is like, well, whatever.
Yeah,
I want to move on,
And though, I think that Barry is a douchebag, but, like, trying to, because of his lying and, like, cheating isn't okay. If you're going to sleep with other people, have conversations with your partners and don't be a fucking coward. But, like, I think that, like, to write a happy ending for Mindy, because I still like Mindy. And
I love Mindy.
But, it would be so cool if, like, how moving forward, they just had, like, an open relationship and they both got what they wanted. And, Barry could be more honest and upfront about him, sleeping with other people, and Mindy could get all the security and the benefits and the companionship that she's looking for in other ways. And, maybe getting her jollies elsewhere too,
Oh my God. I just created a whole story in my mind.
Fanfic.
And I do think that I had a few feelings, and I wrote some notes about this. I would feel very differently about Rachel still supporting this relationship moving forward and this wedding moving forward if it was something other than cheating. If, like, he had been physically abusive, I feel as though the approach would have to be very, very different, which, like, is obvious. But, like, I mean, in the sense of, like, I don't think that this is, like, kind of a deal breaker. And, like, because I remember first watching this episode and being like, why isn't Rachel convincing her that she's making a stupid decision, blah, blah, blah. Like, she should be being a better friend. But, like, I think in this case, being a good friend is just like, all right, if you feel like this is the best choice. And I think that, again, it comes through a little bit with that reality plus compassion. Mm-hmm. She's, like, throwing everything on the table. She's told her friend that, like, all these things are there, but she's also like, look, I'll still support you and like, be there if that's what you need. And she even says a line like, I hope Barry doesn't kill you and eat you in Aruba. So she's, again, like, she's very much declaring that she, like, isn't sure about this relationship. She doesn't know how she feels about it, but she's going to support her anyways, which is, like, I think maybe Rachel should be awarded the best friend award. But she kind of, like, goes down after, like, sleeping with her ex-best friend's fiance. But
yeah, and I think that that's sort of, like, what you can do with your friends is sort of, like, be honest, but still love them and show up for them. I actually want to read some of the responses that we got from, some of our Instagram polls here. Specifically, I asked, what would you do / say if you found out your friend slept with their ex who is now engaged? Which I thought was a very interesting question. And I think that a lot of other people did too, because I actually got probably more responses than I normally do on these sort of like open questions.
Mm-hmm.
I love how one of them, to open up with like the most compassionate one, is, are you okay?
Right.
Which I think is like such an interesting thing because like, yeah, like that's like a great way to start a conversation with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, One other one is just be reminded that we are all capable of shittiness.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them that it was a really bad thing to do. You answered one here that, but you already talked about it, so just skip over that.
I don't even remember what I said.
And you said, oof, I'd have a hard time holding my tongue. Maybe a combo of compassion and reality.
Yeah.
And then another one is I would tell them that's not cool and distance myself from them.
A range of reactions.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like people are going to react differently because cheating is a traumatic thing that can happen in your life. And your personal response to finding out that your friends are cheating is going to come from a place of like, you have to be a supporter for your friend, but also primarily you have to be a partner to yourself. And you also have to like be able to make sure that you are able to show up to actually be
genuine,
the right type of support for that person. And so like, distancing, although I think that asking someone compassionately, like, are you okay is one thing, but then other people, it might be kind of like I'm not cool with that. And having to distance yourself because that's something that resonates really strongly with you, right? And then, you let the other friends that person has kind of be the ones to step up and help them navigate through the situation and be the ones to ask the questions like, are you okay?
Totally. Okay, speaking of friendships and dating, let's talk about
Why
Chandler.
did you look at me that way?
No, I was trying to find a segue. I was like, how do I segue to talking about Chandler? Okay, we're going to talk about Chandler. That's my segue.
Okay.
So I think we kind of talked a lot about Chandler already. Like him waiting for the ring, damn it, ring. But what we did talk about is the end of that. So he spends literally the entire episode kind of pining, with all of these like issues happening with his phone. His phone turns off and then he like leaves a voicemail and then pretends that like he's at a restaurant while leaving a voicemail to show that like, he has friends and he hasn't been sitting there all day honing, and it took him like 2 hours to write this thing, like, which is like all really cute, it's like all like, and I really wish that they had built this up and like not let us down,
Right.
like him just like being real, but like I guess there was no other way unless they wanted to keep this character for like another episode, but like it just felt like he clearly like had such a great time. He told them all about it. He was like really getting excited to send this person a voicemail. He was like, why hasn't she called? And he's like feeling all these like anxiety feelings. And it was cute. Like in a lot of ways it was cute. He was stoked. He was like, he wanted her to contact him and then he tried calling her and then she never called back. So clearly she's not interested. She's ghosting him. Ghosting in the 90s. And so like, and then in the end, we just kind of get let down.
Yeah, I feel Chandler, especially in this part of the seasons, he's really just this beautiful little relatable outlet of anxiety. like you,
True.
even though he's like such a shit, especially at the end of this episode, which is unfortunate that it wraps up this way. But like the entire episode, you're like right there with him. Like even though like we didn't date in a time where this was like the communication rules and like regulations or unofficial regulations of dating, like we have other means of communication and always have in all the times that we've been old enough to date, because 5 years old is not old enough to date. But it's just like you're right there with him the entire time. You're like, I get this, even though I had a cell phone by the time I was dating,
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, there is like that anxiety of the dating anxiety. It's real. It's real. We talked about it a little bit, but it's like, it's hard to, it's hard to figure out what is like shitty games that are being played and what is like just being excited and not really knowing how this person feels about you and like not feeling like you're ready to share how you're feeling about them because you don't know yet. There's no answers yet. And so like this kind of like playful what's going on kind of thing, you know? So
Yeah.
So in the end she shows up and she was like
she seems great.
She seems great. I think it's a little weird she showed up.
Really?
I do. It depends on how far she lives.
Right.
If she lived like across town, it would be very weird if she showed up.
Right.
If she lived like a couple blocks down, then like I was on a walk and I just decided to pop into a place where I knew you probably would be. You know?
It's funny because I think if it was a dude, we'd say the opposite. We would be like, oh, that was such like a considerate thing to do. And like, you know, look at him wearing his heart on his sleeve and just like showing up. You know, like it's kind of romantic.
I don't know. I don't feel like she wore her heart on her sleeve though. It didn't feel like romantic. Like it felt like she was like, yeah, I got your number wrong and like I wanted to make sure you were okay. Like it was just kind of like, it didn't feel like romantic. It felt like kind of like business like.
I don't get that impression.
Like showing up to a cafe that you know this person that you went on a date with once sometimes hangs out with his friends.
Sometimes.
Okay, yeah, but she doesn't know how often he's there. On the off chance that he might be there, like that's kind of intense. Like if she was a couple blocks away, then no, it's not intense. If she's a couple blocks away, then I think it's very cute. If she's like across
or if she's
town,
like passing by,
if she's like in New Jersey coming to Manhattan, like that's weird.
Okay, yeah, but you're making like these intense assumptions that she's clingy.
No, I would feel the same way if a guy was like lived like let's say lived in the West Island and then like came to see me at a bar downtown Montreal that I sometimes go to and like just to like at the off chance that I could potentially be there.
Right.
It's weird.
I mean, the missing piece is that you were trying to get a hold of him all day.
I would still not be happy for him to show up. Like it's just weird. Like you've been on one date. Like if it was like a couple of months of dating, sure. But if it was one date, like, you know, you dress differently on your first date. You like get yourself ready in a specific way. You haven't shared everything with them. And then they're just going to show up and like catch you off guard in this like location that is like your space with your friends. And then it's honestly what it is. It's my social anxiety. It freaks the shit out of me.
You're like, I need you to be very, like...
You have to give me 3 days warning, but also you have to love me incessantly.
Yeah, okay, I think that's what it is. Because
really, I just have major anxiety about...
Really glad you're married.
I'm saying I'd be alone if I wasn't married.
No, I would just be your friend being like, if this was a real thing that happened to you and you're like, this is not cool, I'd be like, oh my God.
I really used to be hyper like dissecting every single text message I used to get for sure. But it wasn't like, but it definitely didn't feel.
Were you Chandler about it?
I was very Chandler about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, let's take just a couple of minutes. Not a lot of minutes, a couple of minutes to talk about the peeper.
Oh, right. I totally forgot that we had that to talk about still.
You thought we were done the episode?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I totally thought we were done the episode. Okay, so.
We also didn't talk about Joey and lesbianism. That's why I was trying to move us along.
Yeah, we debated a lot of things randomly. You guys, this is why we edit our podcast.
This is exactly why we edit our podcast.
Okay, so
okay, I want to talk, let's just say like 30-second rant, okay, about Joey and lesbianism. So, 1, lesbianism is not a thing that exists for straight men. 2, lesbians are consistently over-sexualized in media, and to the point in which like they are like that media representation ends up being like harassment in public locations. So if you are like more of a femme lesbian, you tend to be sexualized by men at bars, and your relationship is not taken seriously because you're really just there to please the men who are there.
Again, it's like the concept of the male gaze. Everything that women do is for men, essentially.
And if you're a less femme or more kind of butch lesbian, you usually have the opposite. Men tend to kind of treat you as an other in a lot of ways. You're not one of the guys, but you're also not a girl. Therefore, you are not like within the scope of having a regular human interaction. So like Joey sexualizing like Rachel, who is not even a lesbian, for like kissing her friend in camp. First of all, he then goes on to ask, were you guys wearing uniforms? Which
he's like trying to get information.
Really gross.
Yeah, he's trying to get like, information to be able to picture it, to put it in like, what is it called? Like the spank bank or whatever.
What is this? I've never heard of this.
You've never heard of the spank bank?
I feel like I'm very naive. And every episode we learn more and more about how naive Emily is.
Yeah, I'm learning more and more about how naive Emily is every episode too.
Whatever.
The spank.
Am I like that married lady now?
You are definitely that married lady. And
I used to be so much more gay.
I mean, just because you're gay doesn't mean anyway.
Totally kidding.
But the spank bank is sort of like a little virtual memory bank of experiences or images that one pulls up when masturbating.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate this description. Okay, yeah, totally. So it's gross what he does. He basically sexualizes Rachel as a teenager, because she's in camp.
Right. Yeah, I guess you're right.
There's like a fine line because he's like, he doesn't know he didn't like, whatever. She's an adult now. But anyways, all that to say that it's gross what he does the entire episode, where every single time Rachel is hugging another woman, he sexualizes her, and he also sexualizes Carol all the time. So it's not like he's just like being silly around his straight friends. He's also making his like the lesbians in his life uncomfortable. So not cool.
I also want to point out that 40% of people who answered in our polls said that yes, they do have a guy in their group of friends who sexualizes anything the women or femme folks do.
That's disgusting. That's a large quantity.
That is a very large quantity. But like, just to, like, I wasn't surprised when I saw that. I mean, like a little in a sense, because I just don't want that to be a thing. But it's just like we're actually dealing with a real issue, right? Like the male gaze is real. Men who think it's okay, it's real. It's just anyway.
I think I answered no, but that's just because like I have like 4 friends right now.
Emily is taking applications for friends in Montreal, guys.
If you want to be my friend, send me a message. Okay, thanks. But also, I'm very busy. Very, very busy and very tired. Okay. And then the peeper. Let's talk about the peeper. I know we're kind of brushing through these last few things, but it kind of goes along the same lines of like, I don't know, like sexualizing people and things like that. And I did have like this feeling in my head where I was like, I definitely feel better about the fact that like the person looking into everyone's apartment is a woman with a telescope versus a man with a telescope. And like, they're both gross and creepy. They really are. But there is something to say about the way in which, men commit more violent crimes than women. And therefore, there is a certain amount of like anxiety and fear about like someone watching your daily movements. That is different. But again, both are not okay.
Yeah, totally. I think it's entertaining because of the spin of the situation where like, and also the irony, right? Because like there's the irony that like they demonstrate in this episode where they're continuously watching the neighbor across that, ugly naked guy, as they call him. And, on the one hand, and then in the same, breath, they're criticizing this person. But this person also has binoculars. I do think that there is a difference between someone choosing to keep their blinds open when they knowingly know that people can look in and see them.
And they're naked.
Yeah, and they're naked. Like
you come, there's like, you're fine with people seeing you at that point to a certain extent.
It's like, invest in some blinds or throw a t-shirt over your window or, expect that people are kind of going to see you.
Yeah. If they like pull up a chair and start snacking on popcorn and staring at you, then that's a different little story. Creepy. But like if they're like walking by there, and they're standing on their balcony eating a hot dog and they notice you there, then like, yeah.
Binoculars, different story. But
I think say telescope?
Telescope, whatever.
Feels like weird to have a telescope is next level.
Yeah, that is next level. It's like, I want to read your credit card. But I think that it's an interesting little riff off of like the typical, it just makes it entertaining because it's like a woman, but then also she turns around and she's like giving them like emotionally supportive, like affirming compliments on their life.
It's a good twist. It's a good writing twist.
Yeah. And suddenly they're like, well, like would I appreciate just having like, it's like technically a third party, non-biased, someone just like there being like, no, what you wore was really great. No, you're fantastic. Like I saw the way you made those cookies and that was very impressive. Like, like I kind of wish I had that in my life.
I do not. The idea of someone watching me at all times is like,
but like you didn't fully know, Anyway,
that sounds even creepier.
Okay, I don't actually want that, guys. I'm just saying. But if it could be guaranteed, non-threatening, loving, anyway, whatever.
I don't actually want that. The person was there.
But anyway, I thought it was funny because I jokingly put up the question, could you be okay with a neighbor who spies but gives really affirming feedback about your life? And 18% of people said yes.
Nice. I like it.
It's cute.
Clearly you guys have been in the pandemic for a long time.
Any friends?
Anyone validating my life choices right now is really needed.
Any human contact.
Life.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we covered everything. Was there anything?
Okay, Emily, who was the best friend?
I'm still going to say Monica. Because also, I forgot to mention that Monica also gives Chandler some really great tough love advice too. When he's kind of like pining and he's like, waiting for her to call, blah, blah, blah. Monica's just like, just call her, pick up the phone and call her, just do it. And like she gives him this kind of, again, reality check. So I think Monica was the best friend of this episode.
Yeah. I feel like I can't really disagree with you on that. She's just like kind of a voice of reason and compassion at the same time. I do think that like in its own way, kind of like what came up in the episode, that Rachel could maybe be argued as being one of the best friends because like despite a really hard situation, I mean like sleeping with Barry when he's engaged, not the greatest, but she also can like pull through this difficult situation, band together with an old friend that she had like turbulent, find that like sort of like bonding and, hold space for each other, stand up for her and still support her through like the hard situation and respect the decisions that she's making. Like, I think that that's also pretty great.
Right.
But along that same thread, do you know who won Best Dressed for this episode?
Monica.
Monica won the Best Dressed.
I'm picturing it in my mind. It was the best outfit.
Yeah, the white button-up t-shirt tied up in the high-rise Levi's washed-out jeans. Yeah. And what's funny is that Rachel came in not too far behind with her really interesting, like, button-up white blousey thing with that interesting skirt that's tied up.
I really didn't like that outfit.
Oh, really? I really loved that skirt.
That material for her shirt made me nauseous. I really thought it, like, I liked the skirt, but the shirt was like, ugh.
Anyway, I'm just saying that I just think it's interesting because it's like, it parallels who we think is best friend in the episode.
Interesting.
And so maybe moving forward, we should see if like, best dress lines up with best friends,
Wow. Because that's a very real correlation.
I don't know. Maybe that's what the creators intended to do.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in this week.
Hope y'all are holding up all right out there.
You can find me. My name is Emilie at emiliebyoga.com or on my Instagram or Facebook at emiliebyoga. That's Emilie with an I-E, not a Y.
And you can find me, Quinn. Oh my God, where can you find me? Online at quinnkbrunet.com or quinnkbrunet as a handle on Instagram. You can find our podcast as WT Phalange Podcast on Instagram and on Patreon, which, by the way, big update. We changed around our Patreon structure. And so now we just have one beautiful, lovely community.
One tier. And you get everything.
Yeah. So just FYI, you can go onto our Patreon now and basically like sign up for any amount that you feel is feasible for you to pledge every month. And you have access to like a backlog of like fun stuff, like uncut versions of our episodes, a bonus episode that we never aired, that sort of stuff. And then after 3 months of pledging, we will send you a sticker in the mail.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Great. So thanks so much for supporting us, guys. As always, you can head over to iTunes also to give us a review. That would be super appreciated. But thank you so much.
It's Apple Podcasts. Just FYI.
iTunes? I always say iTunes. Apple Podcasts. My bad. Keep deconstructing and diversifying the media you consume.